Hey everyone, it's Dr. Namani and Dr. Louie back again today with the Athlete Spine, and we're really excited to have Emily Hu on with us today. Who her day job is she is a biomedical engineer, and she's worked for companies in Silicon Valley, has worked for Google, and run clinical research. Trained at Duke University. But by night, she is a world record holding powerlifter, and has written a book on how to get in shape and to stay in shape. And we're really, really excited to talk to her today. So Emily, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and that's such an interesting background too, because we know a lot of people who powerlift, but they don't balance it out with sort of the whole academic side as well. And there's like so much convergence between the two. I guess one of the first questions I have is, how did you get into the world of powerlifting?
Yeah, so that's kind of a funny, like roundabout story. When I started powerlifting, I was 30. And that's when it's not old for a person, but it's incredibly old for an athlete. Like by then, most people retire. I was working at a startup and I was really stressed out, and nothing helped me relieve stress like going to the gym. So it must have been a really stressful job because I started competing professionally because I was like getting so strong.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty. It's not uncommon, I think, that we hear about people who, at some point in their life, try to turn the corner and start to pick up some sort of hobby, I guess you could call it, to try to
Yeah.
relieve stress. But for you, it kind of became more than a hobby, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just started off as, I am the child of immigrants. So my parents were very strict when I was in junior high and high school. No extracurriculars, study only. But I think I was actually more like I liked activity more than I ever did studying. So once I entered the workforce, I thought, oh, I have all this free time. I should do all of those sports I dreamt about in high school. And, like I never got to compete at anything like, ever. So I should try to compete in a sport as one of those bucket list items. And I picked powerlifting. And here we
Well, that's a fun, untraditional path. And so sort of like we always love talking about sort of the spine world and all of these athletic endeavors. And you know as well as us, there's just a lot of stories. There's a lot of myths, but there's a lot of facts out there regarding sort of
Oh yeah.
powerlifting and neck and back injuries.
Yeah, yeah.
What are your thoughts on, hearing some of these? What are the most common myths that you hear
Oh
and you
man.
find
If,
yourself
if I
spelling?
had if I had like $5 every time someone told me I was going to break my back using my powerlifting technique, I would not need a day job. I'd be rich from insults. But so the most I hear it is like the deadlift and the bench. So I have three world records in the bench press, and I have a very, very powerlifting specific technique where I really heavily arch my upper back to cut the distance, spare my shoulders, get a little bit more like back support. And everyone who's not a powerlifter always tells me, you're going to hurt your back. You're going to break your back. That technique is so bad for your back. And then when I deadlift, when most people deadlift, actually, if you're one rep maxing, there's going to be curvature of the spine. And as long as it's like pretty even and gentle, you're probably okay. But people say you should never bend your spine when you deadlift. You're gonna break your back. Everyone thinks I'm gonna break my back just being in the gym. So those are the two most common ones. But I think the funny thing is about powerlifting is when you do the techniques like the safest, best way from one rep maxing, it's a very controversial technique. If I were to try to one rep max with a completely flat back, I don't think it would happen. I think I'd have a better chance blowing out my lower back because that's probably not a natural position for heavy loading. And then if I did a bench press, like one rep max on a completely flat back, I think I'd probably blow up my shoulder over time because, whenever I hear an old man story of, oh, I used to bench more than you, but I blew up my shoulder benching like 7,000 pounds in high school. These are always the flat back benchers. And they always like ruin the front part of their shoulder because they're flat on their back and their humerus is just grinding away in the front of their AC joint.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you clearly have, expertise, not only just obviously the practical expertise from becoming, a record holding powerlifter, but also your biomedical engineering expertise, right? So you clearly know things about mechanics and how the body, works together. So have you ever had any sort of back or spine injuries, over the years that you've been powerlifting? And then what are some of the more common things that you see recreational lifters do in the gym that may lead to spine injuries?
Yeah. So the first and only real injury I had is I pulled my lower back trying to deadlift without proper technique or a chaperone. So the first time I ever tried to powerlift, it was at a bodybuilding bro science gym. And, I had a bro try to teach me how to conventional deadlift. And I heavily rounded my lower back and I didn't really round my upper back that well. So all of the strain was concentrated in the lower back. And then I pulled probably my SI or my lower, like just the lower spine. And that was my lesson. And I got a coach from that point on. And I got a very good powerlifting coach. And I've never had an injury since.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really helped. But I actually see so many lower back injuries in the gym, even in powerlifting gyms, from people who are self-taught and they don't have great technique pulling or squatting. I think a lot of it is from butt wink. So they either draw their butt underneath when they're squatting, or
Wait, so
they
we both paused for a second. We were making sure we heard you right. Butt wink, I think is
butt
the
wink. Yeah, that's what we call it in the gym. It's like when you tuck your butt underneath when you squat, right? So a lot of
Okay.
times people they'll pull their butt or their SI, or they'll pull their SI or their lower back, sorry. And then a lot of people will try to do the opposite when they deadlift because they've heard, no arching. So
Yeah.
they'll try to straighten their back. And what they do is they actually they'll lengthen and draw out their toe bone. So then their lower back is extended the other direction. And then they'll pull it that way when they deadlift.
Hmm.
Well, that's really interesting. One of the reasons why it's sort of fun to talk to you right now too is the Olympics are going on and the
Yeah.
weightlifting events are actually about to start and sort of in the second half. And, as I'm watching them, I realize their techniques are not the same techniques that we usually see
Right. Yeah.
people in the gym. So, us making fun of people with these different techniques, they're clearly doing something right, even though it's different from us because, I mean, obviously you can tell we're not major power lifters, but the way we've done it in the past, is very different from what we see on TV. And then sort of hearing from your story as well, right? There's like a mechanical advantage in lifting certain ways, but there's also a
Right.
safety element, right? In
Right. Yeah.
protecting yourself. One of
Right.
the questions I have for you is you picked up, like you said, powerlifting sort of later than a lot of people generally would. What advice would you give to people who are sort of like you and are like, you know what, this looks like a lot of fun. I want to get healthy. I'm considering powerlifting. What are the steps to take? What is a reasonable way to go about that?
If you can
Practice
afford
for a
it, the
friend.
first 3 months, lift in person with a coach.
Yeah.
Because what turns most women actually, they get injured once and they think, oh, I'm not meant to weight lift. Or women, I think so many women get told lies like you shouldn't lift heavy, you're gonna hurt yourself, right? And then for a lot of these women, the second it happens, they're like, oh, I shouldn't have been doing that. I should just go back to the pink weights. So yeah, learn proper technique early. You will have a much longer like lifting career if you learn how to do things properly and you won't injure yourself and then you won't get discouraged.
Yeah, that's really, really good advice. I mean, even as I've kind of started lifting again recently, and it's amazing how you'll see people at the gym just have all sorts of crazy techniques, and if you're a 20-year-old, perhaps you can get away with it, but if you're 30 or 40 or even older, and then starting out with bad technique, your risk of injury is certainly going to be a lot higher.
Right.
Yeah, and something we want to bring in as well is, we see a lot of patients actually, and they don't obviously all require surgery that come in with weightlifting injuries, right?
Mhm.
Oh,
And
really?
and the interesting
That's
thing
like
is,
injuries typically.
well, and it's like wide spectrum, right? It's not all these weekend warriors that are doing something that they're not really trained in, but it's also sort of those who are doing it fairly routinely as well. Because, right, there is a certain element and risk to any type of physical activity that places your back or neck at risk for some sort of injury. But most commonly, what we see are just like what you talked about, right? These are like lumbar or muscular strains or sprains. It can take a few weeks to get better in some people, especially as you get older. We do see some
Yeah.
herniated discs, and we always like to remind everyone, right? If you feel, shooting pain down your legs or numbness or tingling weakness, certainly cut back a little bit and should
Right.
certainly get seen. But, we see that a lot of people are fairly responsible in how they're going about that as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think some people are actually even too responsible, right? They wouldn't get close to maxing out even if you told them to. So
Yeah,
there's like two
yeah, I'm not.
spectrum. There's like the
Yeah.
very like overly cautious lifters who will never push themselves. And then there are the people who think they know it all and they push themselves too much with really bad technique. And
Mhm.
that's where you get the problems.
Yeah. So with the Olympics, the Olympic weightlifting event's about to start, who are you going to be watching? Are there any particular athletes that you're going to be paying attention to in the upcoming week?
I'm not following anyone this year. I think a lot of the people I really liked retired.
Oh gosh, yeah,
China as a country has always been super impressive, has always dominated, especially in
yeah,
Olympic lifting. So in general, for gymnastics, I love USA. And then for Olympic weightlifting, well, actually, no, that's not true. I think China's the best team, but I have a Taiwanese weightlifter that I'm a big fan of.
yeah.
Uh, 8 years ago, I tried Olympic weightlifting for the first time. And because I had so much powerlifting strength, for my first competition, I got really close to numbers that would have qualified me for nationals, but I wasn't strong enough to compete for the USA team. So I thought, oh, I can compete for my parents' country of Taiwan. They had one really, really good athlete in their Olympic lifting program, and she was the exact same weight as me. So I
Oh
thought,
no.
I guess not. They don't need me. So I like her because she took my spot.
Yeah.
We'll get ready to wrap this up here. Hey, what's your favorite lift to perform, and what's your favorite one to watch on the Olympics coming up, and
Oh,
why?
my favorite lift to perform. My favorite Olympic lift. I love the
Yeah.
snatch. I think it's really fun. But obviously, the clean and jerk is the hardest. So
Yeah.
that's the one that gets like all the respect.
Mhm. Awesome. Well, hey, Emily, thanks so much for joining us today. We really enjoyed hearing about, your expertise. Everyone who's thinking about getting started back in lifting, definitely should check out your book, and I may do so myself, given that I'm of an age where I could certainly get injured, trying to do something incorrectly. So thanks again for being on with us today. Everyone, be sure to like and subscribe and follow us on Instagram. Until next time, we'll see you again.
All
Do
right.
it.
Thanks for having me.